The boardroom atop Trump Tower shimmered with the kind of opulence that only decades of ambition could buy. Gleaming mahogany stretched across the long table, flanked by leather chairs that creaked under the weight of nervous advisors. Today, though, the air wasn't thick with business deals or campaign slogans. It was personal. Donald Trump sat at the head of the table, his navy suit crisp, red tie bold as ever, exuding the confidence of a man who'd conquered more rooms than most could dream. Across from him, Barron Trump sat tall, his hands folded, his face a mask of quiet resolve. This wasn't just a father and son meeting. It was a collision of eras, a test of what the Trump name would mean in a world that refused to stand still. The advisors dotted around the table were silent, their usual chatter replaced by uneasy glances. They'd seen Donald Trump bulldoze opponents, charm crowds, and silence doubters, but this was different. Barron, at 19, wasn't here to nod or obey. He was here to challenge, and the stakes felt higher than any election. Donald leaned back, his fingers drumming a slow rhythm on the table, studying his youngest son like a chess opponent he hadn't quite placed. Barron met his gaze, unflinching, his conviction a sharp contrast to his father's bluster. Finally, Donald broke the quiet. "Okay, kid," he said, his voice steady but edged with impatience. "You've got something to say. Let's hear it." Barron didn't hesitate. "The world's moving, Dad," he said simply, his tone calm but firm. "And you're not." A ripple of tension ran through the room. One advisor coughed softly, another shuffled papers they weren't reading. Donald's fingers paused mid-tap, his eyes narrowing just enough to betray a flicker of surprise. "Not moving," he repeated, leaning forward. "I've got more energy than anyone in this game. What are you talking about?" Barron exhaled, choosing his words carefully. "I'm talking about the people," he said. "The ones who put you where you are. They're changing, and you're not keeping up." Donald smirked, a reflex honed over decades. "I've got the best people, Barron. Loyal, tremendous people. They're still with me, more than ever." He waved a hand as if dismissing the idea outright. "For now," Barron replied, his voice unwavering. "But not forever." The smirk faded. Donald's jaw tightened, though he kept his tone even. "You think you know this better than me? I built this, kid. I know what they want." Barron leaned in slightly, his eyes steady. "You knew what they wanted. Past tense. But it's not 2016 anymore. They don't just want a fighter. They want someone who gets them now." The room felt smaller, the air heavier. An older advisor shifted uncomfortably, his pen tapping against his notebook. Donald crossed his arms, his posture defensive. "I get them plenty," he said. "I talk to them every day. Rallies, calls, you name it. They love me." Barron shook his head. "You talk at them, Dad. You don't listen." A sharp breath escaped one of the advisors, barely audible but enough to punctuate the moment. Donald's nostrils flared, his voice dropping lower. "I listen," he said, each word deliberate. "I listen to the winners, the doers, the people who matter." "That's the problem," Barron shot back, his tone still measured but cutting. "You think some voices count more than others." Donald leaned forward, his hands pressing into the table. "That's called leadership, kid. You don't waste time on the noise, you focus on the signal." Barron didn't blink. "That's called losing touch." The words landed like a slap. For a moment, no one moved. Donald exhaled sharply, shaking his head as if to shake off the insult. "Ridiculous," he muttered. "You think you've got it all figured out because you've got some fancy ideas from school?" "No," Barron said, his voice softening but resolute. "I've got eyes. I see what's happening out there. People feel ignored, Dad. They don't want another speech. They want proof you still care." Donald froze just for a heartbeat, and Barron saw it, the tiniest crack in the armor. He pressed on. "You won because you gave them a voice. You made them feel seen. But now, they're starting to feel like props, cheerleaders for your show." The advisors held their breath. Donald's expression hardened, his fingers curling into a fist. "I built this movement," he said, his voice rising. "From nothing. No handouts, no favors, just me. I don't need a lecture on caring." Barron nodded, unfazed. "Then show it. Act like the guy who fought for them, not the guy who's resting on what he won." Silence stretched across the table, thick and electric. One advisor dared a glance at his colleague who stared blankly at his notes. Donald rubbed his hands together, a habit when he was thinking or stalling. "Okay," he said, nodding slowly. "You've got all the answers, huh? Tell me, what should I do, genius?" Barron hesitated, not out of doubt but because the question demanded more than words. He straightened, meeting his father's challenge head-on. "Stop playing the same game," he said. "You keep running the old playbook, bragging about the past, flexing for the crowd. It worked then, but it's wearing thin." Donald raised an eyebrow. "You want me to change my whole deal? Reinvent myself?" "No," Barron replied. "I want you to stop chasing applause and start solving problems. They don't care about your trophies. They care about their lives." The room went still. Even Donald didn't respond right away, his jaw tight but his eyes searching. Barron took a step closer, his voice quieter now. "This isn't about you anymore, Dad. It's about them. If they don't believe you're in it for them, you're done." Donald let out a low chuckle, but it lacked its usual bite. "Done?" he echoed as if testing the word. "You think I'm scared of losing?" Barron shook his head. I think you're scared of fading." The air shifted again, sharper this time. Donald's chuckle died, his fingers gripping the table's edge. "Fading," he repeated, the word bitter on his tongue. "I'm the biggest name out there, bigger than ever." "You were," Barron said, his voice steady but not cruel. "Back when you were the outsider, the guy who shook things up. But now, you've been at the top too long. People are wondering if you're just another suit." Donald stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. "You calling me the swamp now?" "I'm saying they might," Barron replied, "and that's worse." A murmur rippled through the advisors, quickly stifled. Donald's fingers drummed faster, his eyes locked on his son. "And what's your big fix, huh? How do I prove I'm still the guy?" Barron didn't flinch. "Get out there, not to a rally. Go where they live. Hear them, their bills, their jobs, their fears. Then fight for that, not just for your headlines." Donald smirked, but it was thinner now, less certain. "I've been fighting," he said. "Always have." "For you," Barron countered. "Not for them. There's a difference." The tension coiled tighter. Donald straightened, rubbing his jaw as if weighing his next move. "Let me ask you something," he said, his voice deliberate. "If you were me, right here, right now, what would you do, since you've got the pulse of America all figured out?" Barron paused, gathering his thoughts. Then he stood, slow and deliberate, matching his father's height. "I'd ditch the script," he said. "No more nostalgia trips about how great things were. I'd ask them what's broken now, and I'd fix it. Not for me, but for them." Donald watched him, his expression unreadable. "You think that's enough?" "No," Barron admitted, "but it's a start. People don't want a king. They want a voice. Give them that, and they'll stick with you." For a long moment, neither spoke. The advisors sat like statues, afraid to break the spell. Finally, Donald exhaled, shaking his head. "Waste of time," he muttered, turning toward the door. "I've got real work to do." Barron didn't stop him. "You asked," he said simply. Donald paused, hand on the doorknob, and glanced back. "You think you're so smart, huh?" Barron smiled faintly. "I think I see what you don't." Donald's eyes lingered on him, a flicker of something. Respect, maybe. Passing through. "Maybe," he said, almost too quiet to hear. Then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him. The advisors exhaled collectively, one whispering to another. Did we just see the future? Barron adjusted his jacket, took a slow breath, and walked out after his father. Not to follow, but to carve his own path. Later that week, whispers circulated through Trump Tower. Donald had canceled a rally. No explanation, just a curt memo. Instead, he'd been spotted in a small Ohio town. No cameras, no crowd, just him and a handful of locals at a diner. The advisors didn't know what to make of it, but Barron did. He didn't need to hear the details to know his words had landed. For Donald, it wasn't about admitting defeat. It was about proving he could still fight, not just for himself but for the people who'd built him. For Barron, it was a lesson in speaking up, even when the odds were steep. And for both, it was a reminder that legacy isn't just what you leave behind. It's what you're willing to change for. One bold voice shifted a legacy. This story shows us that real strength comes from listening, not just leading. If this clash between father and son moved you, drop a like to let us know. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for more stories that challenge and inspire. What would you say if you were in Barron's shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We're all ears. Until next time, remember, the future belongs to those who adapt.